October 2022. Behind me is the Enchanted Valley Chalet. This is the fourth time I've actually set my eyes on it. It may be the last time. The Enchanted Valley Chalet is endangered, both by physical threats from the river and restrictions from relevant congressional acts. I'll explain why as soon as I flip this around. Enchanted Valley Chalet. Everything in this video comes from an article. So everything from this the video and talk will be referring to that document. The document is the final Disposition of Enchanted Valley Chalet, May 2020. I will link the URL in the description of this video. Obviously drill down from the Department of Interior, National Park, Olympic National Park Service, and then eventually to that article. Behind the chalet is the East Fork of the Cuprinol River. On this corner, it is 220 centimeters away from the drop-off. The reason I'm giving that in metric is my trekking poles are in centimeters also. So obviously the supports under it are much further in, but this is reminiscent of 2014 when the chalet was hanging over the edge and they moved it from over there. The 2014 Memorandum of Understanding expired in 2019, and a new environmental assessment was done of what to do with the chalet. That assessment has now been completed, is on the Department of Interior National Park website. First, before we get into what the environmental assessment of the chalet is, give some history for those who don't know the history or don't want to just be reminded of it. If you are already well familiar with the history, you can jump ahead a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, while I read this thing. It is an outdated thing because it's in 1920s, the local Olsen brothers, who were incorporated as the Olympic Recreation Company, recognized the recreation potential of the Cuprinol Valley. At this time, the area was managed by the U.S. Forest Service, who was also eager to promote outdoor activities. The Olympic Recreation Company applied for and received permit to develop 5 acres of land in the upper East Fork Cuprinol. In 1930, the construction in Enchanted Valley was started. Considering the remoteness of the valley, the construction building was no easy task. Elvin supervised construction and packed materials to site over a 13-mile trail. Bricks and mortar for the chimney, the disassembled window, and sash, and the milled lumber for the interior were all packed in by horse. The main legs were cut from the immediate area. Tom was assisted by his son Glenn, who was actual builders of the hewn log structures. All of the features were built by the Grizzlies as well. And by 1931, the 2.5-story chalet was completed. For the next several years, Enchanted Valley Chalet and Chalet was a featured stopping point for hikers and horse caravans. It provided shelter for baths, cooks, good beds, and guides for anyone willing to pay the small fees. Following were table charges at the time: meals were $1, single beds $1.50, double beds were $2. In 1938, the East Cuprinol River Range was included in the 628,000-acre Olympic National Park. Olympic Recreation Company anticipated their operations would be out of keeping with the Park Service philosophy. In addition, the company had continued to hope for a road through Enchanted Valley. This was very unlikely now that the area was managed by the Park Service. After the Olympic Recreation sold the building to the Park Service in 1939, the chalet continued operation for 3 more years. However, keeping its operation became an increasing economic challenge during World War II. In 1943, the building was closed and was staffed as aircraft warning personnel. In 1953, and for nearly the next 30 years, the building was reopened as a shelter to any hikers passing through, was seasonally used as a ranger's quarters. Eventually, age, weather, and vandalism, inadequate maintenance, and administration protection took their toll on the building. The chalet was then closed to the public in 1980. The historic chalet had been continued to rapidly decline if it weren't for the Olympic Hiking Club out of Aberdeen, Hoquiam. From 1983 to 85, the club members and volunteers, led by Ann, raised $7,000 in cash and $5,000 in donation material to get the building back in working order. Over 200 man days were donated toward replacing the rotten logs, window seals, repainting trim, putting new doors and shutters. Thanks to hard work, the chalet was now stable and able to be used as a seasonal recreation and ranger station. In addition, one corner of the first floor is open to emergency as a shelter. Enchanted Valley Chalet remains our moment to adventurous spirits who played a part in its history up until 2013, which will be addressed later. Hiker Haven, that was the door that hikers could use in bad weather. However, in 2013, the river again approached the chalet, and in 2014, the chalet was actually overhanging the river. At that point, the decision was made to jack it up on the steel rails that are currently under it, and the chalet was slid 100 feet. The Park Service actually requested 200 feet, knowing to get back into the situation, but they got approval for 100. So they slid 100 feet, left it on the rails, knowing that was probably a temporary solution, and has been closed and locked up for the last 7 years. That closure and lack of administrative use appear to be a factor in the final disposition. They looked at 6 different options. 3 of them were rejected immediately as being impractical. The options rejected were to burn the place as an intact structure, which was thought that might not only would be even control, would be a possibility of getting out of hand, and the concern it might not burn completely. And another rejected thing, they also looked at taking it up into off of this bank, and decided it would be it would involve too much cost because of the elevation gain and disrupt and take out too many trees. The other thing that some people expressed interest in the comment period was to disassemble it and fly it out and reassemble it somewhere else, which, without doing complicated math, given that the structure weighs 48 tons, they realized that probably was not feasible. That left 3 alternatives that were studied in detail. And part of that detail involved the Wild Scenic Rivers Act and what they could and couldn't do to the Cuprinol River, the Wilderness Act of what they could and cannot do in the wilderness. The 3 alternatives were to do nothing and allow the chalet to just fall into the river, to again continue sliding it a further distance, possibly another 200 feet in 2 segments of 100 feet each year, putting it somewhere over there. And this final alternative was to disassemble it, fly out the non-natural parts, and leave the natural elements here to be stacked back in there and decompose. There are competing interests on all of those, most of those options. The Cuprinol River is a wild scenic river. There's restrictions on what they can do to modifying the river. It also has some endangered fish in there, so there are groups that are adamant that the chalet not be allowed to fall into the river. There's also some opposition to moving it. A couple reasons. One being keeping the Olympics as wild and scenic as possible, and whether moving a historic building makes it non-historic or not. This morning I walked off the distance. One comment about not wanting to move it another distance was the fact that they would take out a number of trees. We're looking at the direction they moved it last time. They would continue, the plan was to continue moving it this direction. That's the only tree within 100 feet of this. And it's basically level. I walked it out. Those other trees are beyond 100 feet. If they go beyond 100 feet, the ground is not level, and there are significantly more trees that would have to be impacted. And the proposal was to do it over 2 years, so they could actually do the first move without affecting more than one tree. Also, I have no expertise or knowledge of moving 48-ton buildings, but I do know something about sectional track from model railroad, and know that one can go around obstacles. That, as I said, that's totally different than sliding a 48-ton building on rails that have no wheels under the structure, and that would probably add complexity and cost to this, to moving it without taking out more trees. Two issues with moving it again is that under best modeling, it appears that the river is going to continue marching from that side of the valley to this side of the valley. It's already eaten away several hundred feet. They moved the chalet once. They do not think the 200 feet on this bench will be enough. They think that this entire bench will be gone in 20 years, which would mean that it would eventually be fall in the river or disassembled at the end of that 20 years anyway. Moving 48-ton buildings apparently is not cheap. The other thing is we have ourselves to blame. As noted on that flyer I read, maintenance is a concern on a building this old, and it's not only routine maintenance. It has been opened as an emergency shelter, and there has been damage, some of it intentional, of people who don't appreciate such things, and maybe that is why we can't have nice things. So moving it and reopening it, because frankly moving it and not opening it doesn't solve a whole lot in my opinion, editorial opinion here. It's been a ranger station, it's been a emergency shelter. I've been here in April with snow on the ground before. Also, with the high bear population around here, we're now required to use bear containers, which are expensive and heavy to pack. If that was open as a shelter, it would make a very bear-proof storage for hikers if they could have little storage racks in there for everyone to put their food on. Again, there's probably more problems than solutions with having everyone's food in a common area, unless you end up making lockers, which then feels like you're back in the city. Again, editorial opinion there. In short, with the limitations of the Scenic River Act, they cannot do sufficient modification to the channel, and also there is endangered fish in here of the bull trout, and there are fishery treaties that limit what they can do to the water quality. All right, we're now down on the riverbed directly below the chalet. You can see the problem here looking at the riverbank. Right now, October 2022, the river is at minimal flow. It's almost like a creek way over on the other side. But at high water, you can see that this bank is nothing but loose soil and rocks. So as it comes through, it's just eating away. It's been eating away about 10 feet per year. If it eats another 10 feet, it is going to hang. The next spring, the chalet will again be hanging over the edge. I have not pre-planned this section of the trip, but I'm going to go up and see if I can find where the river shifted course and get that on video, but I'm going to shut this off because I don't know how far I got to hike on the riverbed. Okay, for the following information, I am quoting from selected sections of the environmental assessment from pages 23 and 24. The chalet is located on the active floodplain of the Cuprinol River. The floodplain is comprised of unconsolidated sediment and channel migrates across the floodplain. In 2003, a river erosion, defined as catastrophic channel shifting, began due to massive sediment loading up the valley following heavy rains. And by 2005, the river had migrated close to the chalet. At that time, minor channel work and vegetation manipulation was done by park staff. This work included moving some down logs into more strategic positions, moving gravel and cobble material into banks, or dispersing the same to create more level surfaces, and cutting some of the larger down trees in the riverbed to enable movement with higher flows, and also of positioning some down logs to slow the current. This resulted in the channel migrating away from the chalet. However, in 2013, the channel once again migrated toward the chalet. In the winter of 2013-2014, the area experienced rainfall that was above average storm events, and the high flows resulted in the Cuprinol River main channel shifting by at least 15 feet, and by January coming up to the base of the chalet. That resulted in the 2014 move of the chalet. Now I'm going to stop quoting from the environmental assessment. As in 2018, Park Service undertook a study to determine the future migration of the channel. The first line in that assessment is "Don't cite it or quote it," but it is a public document available with the other documents on the URL in the description. But their conclusion was that since 2014, the channel has continued moving east, following the movement of the chalet, and they expect it to continue moving that direction until the entire eastern bench is gone. We're now walking up to where that where it looks like appears that 2003 erosion started. We're slightly upriver from the chalet, and we've actually gone ahead and crossed the river because of the extremely low water level. I was able to just come across that, barely getting above the ankles. But you can see at this point, the river swerves down that direction. Over to our right, you can see we'll find the old channel. So I think all that I'm working on right now is what was built up in that 2003 flood that built up this board of this broad thing of stone here, and it's going to be fairly thick here. I'm not going to go very far, but I think that was the original river channel back through there. Now it's starting to grow in. There's thick brush. And I'm not going back in there because I don't know what's in there. I've already seen one bear this morning, so not here. But I do know bears frequent this side of the river. So this here is considerably higher than anything in the channel back that direction. So without major modification, which would be contrary to the wild and scenic rivers and possibly affect endangered fish, the river is not coming back here. The Park Service has, the environmental assessment ended up coming up with a recommendation to disassemble the chalet. As I said, this is all documented in the environmental assessment. Final disposition of Enchanted Valley Chalet is 56 pages long and makes a great cure for insomnia if anyone is interested in reading all the details. After I got back from my trip, I did have an email exchange with the Olympic National Park staff regarding Enchanted Valley Chalet, and I almost did not include my final comments coming up because of that email exchange. However, I decided to go ahead and include it, and then I'm going to get back on and read parts of that email that I received from the staff. I will note here that the staff was not aware I was making a video. They just thought I was an individual inquiring about the status of the chalet because of some rumors I had heard, which actually is true, but as I said, they were not aware that I was going to was in the process of doing a video on the chalet. All right, final editorial opinion. This is only an editorial and it actually contradicts some of the findings in the environmental assessment final disposition of Endangered Chalet. What do I think is going to happen? This is actually based on a little bit of what happened in 2014. Because this is the exact same situation they have now. In 2014, they had a decision to let it fall in the river, move it, or disassemble it. Back then, they chose to move it. It seems like it may have been an urgent move to prevent it from falling into the river, and the disassembly was not really considered back then. This time they've taken more time and have decided on the disassembly process, eliminating again the letting it fall into the river. However, this is October, there is no funding at the moment. Pony Bridge is out until April because of repairs. They cannot get pack horses up here. So if there's heavy spring runoff, chalet may be gone by the time that they can get work crews in here, and they've already got the environmental assessment option A covering that. The other thing that could happen is exactly what happened in 2014, and that is the river undercuts it dramatically, but it doesn't fall in the river. Social media posts show the chalet hanging dangerously over the river, and there's a public outcry to save the chalet. That is the best option to override the environmental assessment recommendation. My channel with 31 subscribers and 100 views per year is not going to make any difference in raising awareness, but it's what little I can do. If the chalet is not undercut dramatically and there is no outcry, or even if there is, then they then have the third option of proceeding with the disassembly, because at that point, collapse into the river would be imminent. So that is my predictions. We'll maybe up here in mid to late April, once Pony Bridge is open again, and report back on the status of the chalet. Okay, here is the October 31st, 2022 and November 2nd, 2022 emails from the National Park Service to me regarding the Enchanted Valley Chalet. Good afternoon. The NPS will be going forward with the preferred alternative to dismantle and remove the chalet. We are currently in the process of working through the National Historic Preservation Act, consultation with State Historic Preservation Officer, Advisory Council, and consulting parties for the final disposition and Enchanted Valley Chalet environmental assessment. The outcome of the NHPA consultation will be a memorandum of agreement regarding the agreed upon mitigation for and come up with adverse effects of removing the structure. This is our final step in completing this compliance process. We anticipate having the consultation complete with a final MOA and decision document released no later than the end of January 2023. And then a follow-up comment. Yes, the current situation with the chalet is similar to what we experienced in 2014. However, our superintendent at that time thought it was best to go ahead and move the structure to 100 feet to see if we could find a solution for keeping the structure on the terrace from which it currently rests. The site flood hazard survey revealed that there was no place on the terrace where the chalet could be safe from future erosion and river migration, as the entire terrace is anticipated to be gone in 10 to 20 years from the time of the study. With that, we would have to harden the shoreline from the entire left bank, which would be violation of the Wilderness Act as well as the Wild and Scenic River Act. This is truly a no-win situation for the park, and we are deeply sad that the best option for all resources, including the chalet as well as the best use of taxpayers' dollars, is to remove the structure. I am not going to release the name of the person who sent that email because, as I said, they were unaware that I was making anything public. But the best source would be to do exactly what I did, to go through the front door of the Olympic National Park website and go under contact, and there's a web form there that you can send them an email, and I found that you're very prompt in getting back to you on several occasions. And till that trip, we'll see everyone. And I'll probably have something out day hikes out before then. Starting up in Dozy Walps over Opt Outside for REI weekend following Black Friday, because you don't want to hike in a mall. And we may do some winter day hikes someplace. Do have an offer from someone to go snowshoeing, which I've had snowshoes on 3 or 4 times in my entire life, so we may or may not do that.